Just over 5 years ago, I pushed this 1955 Series 1 107 into this garage. A few weeks ago, I drove it out for the first time. In those 5 years, I've learned some valuable lessons restoring an old Land Rover. I have done a previous video on my top 10 tips for doing a restoration, and that's really about how to choose the right vehicle and how to tackle the project. And I'll put that link to that video on the screen. But in this week's video, I want to have a look at the lessons that I've learned doing this restoration. So bear in mind that I've done a few of these, but this is the oldest vehicle that I've done, and I really learned some new things in this process. And that's what I want to share with you. So I'm going to count those top 10 lessons down from number 10. So let's go. At number 10 is patience. A restoration is going to take longer than you think. You are going to have to wait for parts. You are going to forget to do parts. You are going to find a problem that sets you back. The small things will take you longer than you think. Without patience, you will take shortcuts. The more patience you have, the higher the chances that you end up with a high quality restoration. At number 9, the lesson is measure and check all inter-vehicle parts. Don't think that all Land Rover parts are interchangeable. Just because they look the same doesn't mean they are the same. There are subtle measurement differences between many parts. A Land Rover 80-inch, for example, may look similar to an 86-inch, but in fact it shares almost no common parts with the 86-inch. Make sure you do your research well and measure the parts properly. Okay, lesson number 8 is get the right parts. So you'll find that some parts can be interchanged, and some parts obviously you look the same but you can't use them. But the danger is the parts that look the same and they fit and you can use them, but actually it's not the right thing. So as an example, if you take the tie rod ends, you get two types of tie rod ends. So you get the earlier type tie rod end, which has a collared end to it on the thread, and then you get the later tie rod end which has a full thread. Now if you use those with the wrong tie rod, then you're going to have a problem because you'll end up either stripping the thread or it won't actually tighten properly and you'll end up with an unsafe steering. So for the earlier type with the collared end on the tie rod, you need to the collared end on the tie rod end, you need to use the tie rod with a recessed thread so that it tightens up against the tie rod where there's no thread. You can't, for example, go and use the fully threaded version. That one you have to use with a tie rod which has a full thread on it, and it's made to work like that. So that's one of the things that using the right parts and making sure that it's completely compatible with each other, not just that they fit, but actually that the two parts belong together. At number 7, the lesson is dry fit first. Towards the end of my restoration, I started dry fitting and saved myself a ton of time and frustration. Dry fitting means that you pre-assemble sections sometimes before painting and sometimes when you have some new parts. This helps to confirm that everything will fit and often will highlight to you if you are missing something or if you need to make some changes. Then you can make changes without damaging your new paintwork and save time by getting a missing part to complete the final installation. Dry fitting the body panels is especially beneficial if you want to save yourself some heartache. Also, dry fitting before you need to apply gaskets and sealants will save you having to do some resealing work. At number 6, the lesson is get it right first time. Take the time to do it right the first time. Don't try and take a shortcut, or even worse, ignore the problem and think that it's not that important, because inevitably what's going to happen is that you're going to have to come back to it. And I know how it goes. At the time, you just really want to keep going. You don't want to waste time. You don't want to lose another day doing something. But, you know, another hour, another day, another week, even sometimes another month, in the grand scheme of maybe a year or a couple of years in my situation of how long it took me to do this, really doesn't make a difference. Just to wait that time, if you've got to wait for a part or you've got to get something remade or whatever, it's just so much better to do that, because the last thing you want to do is land up at the end of the project and you regret not doing something properly, and then it's a huge job to change it, or you just actually have to live with it and you know that it's not right. So take the time to do it right first time. Okay, we're halfway now at number 5. The lesson is restore and reuse. There are very few OEM replacement parts, so most of the replacement parts that you will buy will be aftermarket and not at the same quality as the original OEM part. It's tempting to avoid cleaning and restoring a part because you want a new shiny one rather. But I learned that it can backfire on you, especially when you can't find a replacement part, or you have to pay a fortune for a special replacement part, or even worse, the replacement part is of poor quality. I restored many parts that were 70 years old, and they worked perfectly once they were cleaned and lubricated. Plus, it's hugely rewarding to know that you have reused original parts. This is what restorations is all about, after all. At number 4 is disassemble carefully. The previous point all starts with correct disassembly. So if you don't know how to disassemble something, then just stop and rather go and find out. It's not easy because you will be working with usually a very old, broken, rusted, dirty vehicle, and you can't actually see the parts properly. You don't know how things join. So it's very difficult, and you do have a mindset of, well, you know what, this thing's just broken and old, and I'll just get a new one because this thing just looks terrible. And don't do that. Take the time to understand how to disassemble each part carefully. This has been some of the biggest mistakes that I made, and those were specifically on the steering. When I disassembled the steering, I broke the center tube, which is hugely valuable and very important because I didn't understand how it works. And also when I disassembled the dashboard, I didn't pay attention to the switches. I was just of a mind, well, I'll just get new ones. But I could have actually kept and restored some of or at least the old ignition switch cover I could have kept. But I don't even know what happened to it. I see it in early pictures and I never see it after that. And I can't even remember what I did. So yeah, disassemble carefully. That is the most important thing. And don't throw anything away. Don't keep track of it, label it, and put it somewhere safe. Because I promise you, when you come to putting it together, you're going to be looking for the special part and you're going to be like, oh, I don't even know where this thing was, and then you might see it in a picture. So yeah, disassemble carefully. Third last lesson, or third most important lesson, is take pictures of every single little item, especially the small detailed items, because it will help you to know that you've got them, and to remind you of what condition they are, and to remind you what they look like and where and how they fit. So right now I'm struggling to put together the frame for this window, and I don't have any close-up pictures of the way I received the window. So I can't even see if there's parts that I had or didn't have. So I took a lot of pictures, and I really made an effort to take a lot of pictures, but it was usually sort of broader shots of the whole vehicle. Just take your time and go around and take the detailed pictures of each little item during the disassembly process, and that will really help you when you come to assemble And then if you need to replace something, or if you lose it, you might lose something, and you'll have a proper record of the item that you had. At number 2, and the second most important lesson, is double your budget. This is one of the hardest ones to get right. It's very difficult to do a budget when you don't know the full extent of the work required. But it's probably advisable to plan for the worst and hope for the best. But then again, you might scare yourself off completely and not even start. Some advice would be to ask around and see what it has cost other people. If you ask them, they will usually tell you. It's better to be prepared with your budget so that you can plan your finances and make sure that you finish the job and don't abandon it halfway. It's unlikely that a restoration will be a profitable exercise, but I can guarantee you that it will be rewarding. So lastly, the biggest lesson that I've learned throughout this whole process, the number one thing that you need to do to make a restoration really work well is you have to get a parts catalogue. The parts catalogue is the most important book that you can have. It's even more important than the assembly manual, because the parts catalogue has all the parts for the whole vehicle identified, and you can see how everything fits together sequentially, and you can actually see how many of all the different parts there are, and you can identify missing parts that you may or may not have or may have broken. From the beginning of the parts book, you have the details of the chassis numbers, which is firstly useful so that you know exactly what model of vehicle you have. And then the index obviously will give you where to find the stuff, but the breakdown of each of the items has the description of the item, the number of parts that they are, and then the actual part number. And the ones that I really used, actually surprisingly the most, are the things that are quite unique to these vehicles. And that's, you know, when you talk about the body and a lot of the other fittings that they've got, for example, when I assembled the body, I could have a look over here and see exactly which fasteners I needed, what type of fasteners and how many of them. Because when I disassembled it, I mean, a lot of them were so broken and you don't even know if they were original or not, especially if you have an older vehicle that's been modified. So you can see all of that in the parts manual, and then you can find with the part number, you can actually find the part. Even if you can't buy it new, you can find references to it, you can find what people have done with it, and it just really makes it useful. And then obviously the wiring diagram also I used to be able to work out the wiring, so that was very important. But literally this book I looked at not even once a day, several times a day when I was using it, and then during the week if I was trying to research something or find something. I mean, these mechanisms, like the brake mechanism is unique to a vehicle like this, so you need to have this. You're not going to know how to put these things together, and especially if you're doing these older vehicles, you have to have these parts manuals. So this is the biggest thing that you need. And if someone hasn't restored a vehicle using a parts manual, the chances of them having done it properly is very, very small, because some of the best restorers that I know, the way they do it is with a parts manual, and they literally have the parts manual memorized. So if someone doesn't have a parts manual, I'm not sure that they're going to get the job done properly. I want to make this forever. I want to make this forever. Doing another restoration, I've been reminded of just how rewarding this process is. I started off enthusiastically, but in the middle I did lose motivation and wonder why I was tackling such a big task. But now at the end, I'm reminded of the incredible sense of achievement and opportunity to enjoy a rare and classic Land Rover. I hope that I've highlighted some of the things that will help you to plan and tackle a restoration. Thanks so much for watching as always, and until next time, bye.